To order. This is the September 23rd Katuitt Water Commissioners meeting. We're going to be following the agenda. Start out with any public comment that is, I should mention, so first of all, Tom Hoppenstadt, Mark Robinson, Scott Horsley, all in attendance at the meeting. And we have several guests and we appreciate their attendance here. We'll start the meeting. First on the agenda is public comment, specifically not related to items on the agenda, which would be the elementary school and the irrigation policy. So if I could just ask if there are any members of the public that would like to comment or question at this point.
Not seeing any.
Okay, not hearing any. I think what I'd like to do is, we have a number of meeting minutes to go over. We stopped meeting because of COVID and we've gotten a little behind schedule, and I know myself, I've been through most of them, but not all of them. But I guess I would suggest we move this to the end of the meeting to discuss, simply because we've got so many guests here. And could I entertain a motion to do so?
Move that we postpone the minutes approval until the end of the meeting.
For a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great, thank you. So let's move to the superintendent's report. I spoke to Chris earlier today. He could not be with us, so Sean is standing in. Thanks for being here, Sean.
No problem.
Address us with the superintendent's report. We'd appreciate that.
Okay, superintendent's report for September 23rd, 2020. August pumpage in 2019 was 36,998,000. 2020 was 44,877,000. So we pumped 7,879,000 gallons more last month. And we're still in a drought condition. We're at a level 2. And as far as general discussion, we had one new service on Peppercorn Lane. It was a 2-inch service. And I had one replacement service on Main Street. And there were no leaks. Water quality results. All the monthly samples were clear. All the perchlorates were non-detects. And all the disinfection byproducts were well below the MCL. Security update with SCADA. We're in the process now of drawing up some final concerns and possible changes. We have a conference call coming up at the end of the month with GHD, and we'll address that then. Number 4, the tank cleaning. That went well. The tank is back online as of today. Let's see, 414 Main Street. All Comcast has been removed, all their equipment. We're waiting on Verizon. They will be out as soon as possible. Chris just talked to him a couple days ago. The PFAS sampling is done, waiting for results. Chris took all the samples. The private homeowner test results on Trombone Roosevelt sent results to the engineer, Ted and Howard, to get their opinion on it. We are going to do some water quality samples of our own, secondary contaminants and sodium on the 1st of October for comparison. And the vehicle lease, the application's going in next week. The initial request, they sent out the bids for the wrong vehicle. They came back with a Nissan Leaf, which is all electric. And Chris didn't think that would meet his needs, so they're sending it back out to bid for a hybrid vehicle. And I have the nitrate report. We averaged 1.96 for 2020. Nitrites were average of 0.07. And so everything is trending down compared to last year. So that's all I have for the superintendent's report.
Hey, thank you, Sean. Hey, can you give us a sense when we might expect those PFAS results back? I know we've been really focused on that for a while. It's great that we got that sampling done. Any sense of the turnaround time on the analysis?
I haven't heard anything on the turnaround time. I would imagine it'll be a little while, just for the because of the complexity of it.
Yeah.
We'll let you know as soon as we get the results.
Okay, that's great, Sean. Any other questions from the commissioners for Sean? Mark?
Sean, just to give a little context, I think I recall that each of the last 3 months, we've been pumping 8 to 10 million gallons more than we did at the same time period last year. Does that sound right?
Yes.
Because of the drought compared to last year, perhaps?
Yes, I would agree.
Okay. And is that continuing to tax the equipment in any way?
I don't really think it's taxing the equipment. It's just upped our chemical usage as far as pH control and disinfection. We have used considerably more chemicals than we have in the past. But hopefully that'll start trending down as the summer winds down and the cooler weather comes in. And the grass isn't growing, so.
I saw on the weather report this week that Boston has had less than an inch of rain so far in September. So everywhere is still bad.
Yeah, we're getting clobbered, and all the big rainstorms keep missing us. So we're not getting any help from Mother Nature.
Okay, Tom, Mark, any other questions for Sean?
No, thanks, Sean. Great job.
Okay, Sean, thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
And I think I'll also suggest we take the next item out of order. I know most of our guests tonight are here. I think they are for the Katuitt Elementary School property. So unless there's any opposition to that, I think I'd like to move to that. And in fact, I've asked David, Anthony, and Jessica Rapp to be here for that item, and I really appreciate both of you making the time. So David, if I can kind of put you on the spot first, I heard a couple months back you give a very good presentation at a meeting that I sat in on, where you've had a number of evaluations of the property. And as I think everybody knows, we discussed this as water commissioners a while back and have submitted a comment letter. And Jen, maybe you could just pull up that graphic for me if you would. I just make sure everybody's on the same page. We did submit a comment letter on the elementary school property, and basically our concern is, I think everybody knows, but just want to be very clear, this property does sit square in the middle of one of our zone 2 areas and directly up gradient from one of our wells. And Jen's going to show us a map that we prepared that shows the property boundaries. There you go. Thank you, Jen. Within the zone 2 area. And so I guess many people may not know here, I'm partially colorblind, so I got to be careful, but I think you can see the highlighted property line. Is it in blue or purple, Jen?
Blue.
Thank you. And the flow arrow southeasterly towards the well. So our concern, I think our overriding concern is an obvious one. Our role here, our mission is to provide safe drinking water quality. And just to paraphrase our comment, I guess it was really Mark Robinson, former chair, signed the letter, so I'll let him add to my thoughts here, but generally speaking, our concern is that whatever happens in this property, we want to make sure that it's a safe move towards our water quality. And I think, at least my own opinion would be, whatever happens, it ought to be a net reduction in any threats. Currently, it's a relatively small threat. There is a septic system on the property that served the prior school. There are some ball fields there. And so, which we think are relatively low threats, but whatever happens here, our concern is that things might get better. I also mentioned that I had a chance to talk with Lindsay Council. I'm glad you're here, Lindsay, too. And Lindsay, as we all know, has a lot of experience in these kind of things, and I think has some thoughts on this that I want to make sure that we get in here tonight. But maybe I'll start with you, David, if you're willing to just give us a brief summary of where you're at with looking at alternative uses of the property, and then we can kind of go from there.
Yes, good evening. Thank you very much for the invitation, and I'm certainly happy to be here. I think the town is continuing to explore, well, I know that the town is continuing to explore its options. I think we've had two very successful asset management advisory committee meetings where the village of Katuitt was well represented at both meetings with a number of different ideas. And we have taken all of that under consideration. Certainly your January 2020 letter and your June 2020 letter both gave the town an idea of where the Katuitt Board of Water Commissioners stands as far as interest in what happens at that property. Clearly in those letters, you've indicated a desire to, at the very least, see that nitrogen loading and septic impact be no worse than it is when it was a school. And we did bring that into consideration when one of the ideas was to demo the school and look into 3 market rate building lots. Taking into account the fact that a school has a certain profile and a septic load over a certain period of time. Obviously, schools are not in session during the summer, so you have to take that into account to a year-round profile that would go along with 3 houses. But that was just one idea that was put forward, and quite frankly, that idea was put forward as an attempt to try to find a way to creatively fund the demolition, which we know to be around $800,000. We also have a report that was done by DPW as to what it would cost to renovate that particular building back to a school. And noting that the existing septic system is located in the outfield of that ball field, pretty much under where the playground used to be, where there was a greenhouse. We have a decent idea as to where it is based on design documents. But that septic system's older. So if you were going to renovate that back to a usable school, it is highly likely you would have to upgrade the septic system, which would offer an opportunity for kind of an upgraded technology that could certainly address the well in its proximity to the land. But you've also indicated that one of the ideas moving forward could very well be discussing with the town, would it make sense for that building and an appropriate amount of land to be considered as transferring over to the Board of Water Commissioners for fire department use and water district use. I don't think that there's any idea that's necessarily off the table. I don't think that there has been a clamor in the village, certainly in what we've heard from the people at the village, from the village of Katuitt, to put in high density housing there, which would seem to be the most concerning from a water standpoint, but that's really something that you guys can present. If we were to move ahead at this point with any solution, I think we are looking at petitioning the capital improvement program for the money to remove the school. the appropriate time to discuss whether or not it makes sense to work something out with you folks to either take on the burden of the school and the renovation. This is a good conversation to have. We know that we've got a 2 to 3 year window under the best case circumstances to actually get the money to demo the school. So it's not like we have to make a decision by October 1st to what we're going to do with the school. And I think that's why we've teed this up with the Asset Management Advisory Committee. And that's why the chair, Councillor Steinhilber, has really asked DPW to make sure that they put into the pipeline what it would cost to tear down the school and to initiate this conversation. Whether we have to renovate that school or you guys eventually have to renovate that school, there is a cost associated with doing that. Now, your use is different than what the town had prepared its renovation costs to do. You're looking at office space, you're looking at storage. That's going to potentially be a less costly renovation. We were tasked with renovating it back to a school use because we had, at the time that we started that, been considering whether or not the Cape Cod Collaborative was going to be a future user of that building. I have talked with Paul Hilton. They are not out of the discussion at this point from a town perspective. They are certainly willing to discuss options with the town. And if they were to come forward and use that for one of their programs, they are not 100% set that they're going to end up in Yarmouth. They do know that their sandwich programs need to find a new home. While they are certainly looking at the former Bridgewater State University, State College location that was in Yarmouth, that's not 100% ideal. So they are still in the game for Cotuit Elementary School. But at this point, they recognize that that's going to be costly for them and for all of the school districts that are the Cape Cod Collaborative to have to renovate that school to make it work for them for the long term. So I think that there's still plenty of time to discuss what could happen there at that location. In the short run, I have been tasked by the town manager to see if there are ways to make that building cost neutral to the town of Barnstable until we get to that point, which means trying to find some short-term tenancies for the next couple of years that will at least cover the costs associated with keeping the building open. The worst case scenario at this point would be to mothball the building. That's not something that the village would like to see. That's not something that I think allows the building to improve. So if we can get some tenants in there that help us cover utility costs, it gives us someone who's there to, deal with broken windows or illegal dumping or something along those lines. It gives us kind of eyes and ears in the village to let us know what's happening. We've seen and learned the hard way with Osterville Bay and also with Marston's Mill School out on 28 that a building that sits vacant attracts the wrong kind of attention. And we certainly don't want to see that happen if we can avoid it. The best way to do that is to bring someone in and have them be a tenant so that the building is lit and heat and you know that water pipes are intact. So that's kind of our short-term task is to try to find some tenancy for the next couple of years and let the demolition CIP move through the process and see whether or not it gets funded or it doesn't get funded. If it doesn't get funded, then we obviously have more time in which to discuss creative options. And one of those creative options has been to discuss with you whether or not transfer of that building and that property makes sense. I think loud and clear we heard from the village that they want to have public space. They need it for parking, they need it for July 4th, they need it for their cultural events, and they need it to support the Cotuit Cavaliers. I don't think the town has any interest in transferring the entire 13-acre parcel over to anyone at this point. If we were going to demo the school, the idea had always been that we would either demo the school and leave it just be open space, which could then be used while we figure out a long-term solution. If this building does look like it's going to move towards ownership by you folks for office space, to potentially have it be a water treatment center or facility, perhaps the creative use of that water to help water the field is a nice mix. I think that was hinted at in the June meeting, the June letter that was sent by Mark Robinson. It was an interesting word. I'd never heard of that particular fertigation, kind of an interesting word. But it makes sense that you would use water that is treated to water the fields. So I think there's an opportunity here to discuss that. I just don't know what it would look like. And I want to be completely upfront as to what that building is going to need in order to be used forward. So I think that that's where we are. The Asset Management Advisory Committee is going to be meeting again next week. And I have been asked by the chair to make sure that I brief that committee as to the content of our discussion today.
David, thank you for that update. I want to ask for thoughts from both Jessica and the fire commissioners, but I do have one question before I ask them to address this, and that is, you mentioned $800,000 for the demo. What is the estimated cost to renovate it as a school? I didn't hear that number.
DPW came back with a number that approached $4 million, basically because of hazardous mitigation, hazardous material mitigation, windows. It needs a roof. It needs a boiler system. It needs new state-of-the-art controls. Technically, that number also included a new cafeteria, which obviously you guys wouldn't have to worry about that. And it did have some structural work that was going to be done as a part of the roof project that they envisioned.
Okay. But somebody could use it temporarily, as you're suggesting, without incurring those costs. Is that correct?
So that brings up an interesting point. It has been used as a school up until now. Any kind of a change of use associated with that from a school use, we would need to make sure that the building commissioner was comfortable with that. For example, we have been approached by a church to use it, to use the gymnasium. We really have to check and make sure that that use is going to be appropriate for that building, given it's not what the building was intended for and how it's been used in the past. It is not a sprinklered building currently. It may not have the life safety components that are in place that you would normally want with a public gathering space. So if it was going to be an intermittent use, that's one thing, but if it's going to be a regular scheduled use for 2 years, the building commissioner would certainly want to take a look at that and see if upgrades were required.
Okay, thank you. Well, I would like to, I guess I'd first ask, are there any specific questions for David at this point? I would like to, again, offer the some thoughts from both Jessica and the fire commissioners, but yes, Richard.
Mr. Anthony, I really appreciate you sitting in tonight. The estimate that I had seen from 2019 for repairs to the building only totaled $1.34 million. The number 4 million plus that you mentioned, I don't understand what's different in those two estimates. You mentioned the cafeteria, but there are other significant new elements.
So when DPW was tasked to take a look at that building, they were tasked to bring it up 100% to the standards today to make it a viable school. So if it was going to reopen as a public school, they felt that with life safety and with all the things that would need to be done to mitigate hazardous materials and things along those lines, that it would be about a $4 million job that included about 30% soft costs, which include design, bidding, construction oversight, contingency costs, and they kept the contingency costs somewhat high because a building that is 60 or 70 years old or more generally will have many things hidden that you find while the project is rolling out. So while it may seem like a chunky number, it was done by Mark Marnuccio, who's a very good architect, who was able to build project costs into that and worked with an outside consultant who is regularly doing this kind of work. So that's why I think if this was going to be used for something else, office space, you didn't have children who were going to be there, if it was going to be used for partly for storage, I don't think the number would need to be quite that big. So the 1.6 to 4 is really the range depending on use.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Jessica, would you like to address the group at this point? And I don't want to put you on the spot, but I want to give you the opportunity to speak to this if you'd like to.
Thank you, Scott, for inviting me, and thank you, David, for being right on top of this. And I appreciate the efforts on the Asset Management Advisory Committee and the public's involvement, which is critical, I think, to the outcome of this property. And from what my takeaway from the couple of meetings that we've had is, no one wants to see high density housing, certainly without any kind of wastewater treatment facility being put in place. But also I think the open space portion is critical, and the fields are very critical. You know, I know we have Elizabeth Lowell Park, which is open to everyone to enjoy. However, during baseball season, it is off limits to those wanting to play ball or soccer. So this is our only alternative. So to hear these different scenarios and have them include the fields, I think is imperative. And I think I've expressed that going forward with the town manager. He's aware of that need in the community. So we want to hold that. I also am acutely aware of where it sits, a gradient of our well, and we don't want to see anything happen there that jeopardizes that in the state of our water conservation, especially. So I'm here to listen. I'm here to take information back. I want you to realize too, the Asset Management Advisory Committee, which is a subcommittee of the council, is there to advise the manager who is in charge of all the assets in the town of Barnstable. And it ultimately will be the town manager's decision what happens to that building. I am encouraged that the district is interested because the district is a quasi-municipality. It allows the town to transfer, the occupancy without going through the RFP process. I believe that's so, David. Correct me if I'm wrong. And the church that's interested, I think, would have to go through an RFP process if we were to open it up to allow a church to be there. However, I think if the district may become involved, there could be a scenario where the district might be able to sublet. But again, I'm not definite about that, but I think that might be something that could happen to help the district defray some costs, because I know the district, has made overtures to put additions on their building, the fire station, and that was met with some opposition, albeit the costs were pretty high. So I think this could be in right now we're talking short term. Who knows? It might be something that could morph into a long-term building an asset for the district. And I know Freedom Hall is tight for space, and we've lost voting capacity at Freedom Hall because of how small it is. So I think to open it up for the district might be advantageous. And who knows, maybe they want to sell their property on High Street and parlay that into taking over this facility and meeting their needs. So, it's a good conversation to be having. And I think the other thing that I've expressed to Mark Els was, I do not want to have it be a white elephant like Marston's Middle Schools that has laid dormant for over a decade and now is unusable for anybody, you know. So I want something to happen there. And so I'm glad this conversation is going on. So I appreciate you putting it on the agenda, Scott.
Jessica, thank you. And that's a perfect segue. I want to thank Richard for reaching out to me several weeks ago for the fire commissioners. So I'd like to next go to you, Richard, or the other commissioners, and just talk a little bit about what you approached me with about some potential interest in use of the property.
Be happy to. When we heard about and attended those earlier meetings about demolition of the building and potential uses of the property, one of the questions in my mind was looking at district needs going out over the next 20 years. This seemed like a once in a lifetime opportunity, and I didn't think we should let it slip by without at least some serious consideration and examination. We have need for office space within the district on at least the Prudential Committee and Finance Department. We also are looking at, in our fire department building, a 100-plus-year-old building that is pretty well maxed out of capacity. And there are, as I believe someone mentioned earlier, a number of nonprofits in the community like the Kettleers and maybe even the Mosquito Yacht Club that could potentially be interested in having office space available. The water department is pretty well situated for office space right now, but again, looking out over the long term and with needs for potentially filtration buildings, as well as the primary purpose of protecting the well field. That just seemed like a conversation that we ought to have in some detail across all three committees of the district to try to make sure we don't let a potential opportunity go by.
Okay, thank you, Richard. And Lindsay, if I can put you on the spot for a minute. Lindsay and I walked around and kicked some tires over there last week and just talked a little bit. And I respect Lindsay's input tremendously. So I'd like to give you a minute to address us as well, if you would.
Well, thank you, Scott, and thank you, folks, for having me. My overall interest comes through the Community Preservation Committee, and you know, our charge is to protect open space and develop recreation opportunities. This field is on our program for the field improvements through the field study that we did. So we had looked at this site in those regards. That study does need to be brought up to date with current needs, given our current situation. We're finding that the need for playgrounds in town has really risen. And this site had been looked at as a site for a really, you know, substantial playground area, given, you know, the size of the one at the Village Green is a little bit small, and that's, you know, run by the church. So we had looked at this as a potential site for a playground. So CPC would be interested in any aspect of any combination, really, what was to occur out there. The uses, you know, it's been varied. It's sometimes needed as a big parking area, and sometimes, you know, you could see many other activities there if the fields were developed, and it could really be a real village showpiece out there. So it's all, you know, very interesting to me to be on, you know, the discussion here. And I think David Anthony's got the right perspective. The town needs to move this forward, but there is time to come up with the best solution. A number of the people in the village have talked to me, and there is interest in, as was mentioned, not high density use, but some smaller combination of that. And if something could be done in conjunction with field improvements, site improvements, and water protection, I think that'd be a win-win for everybody. So thank you.
Thanks, Lindsay. And let me next ask for my fellow commissioners to get their thoughts, and then we'll kind of open it up to public comment after that. But Mark or Tom, do you have any thoughts you want to share at this point?
This is Mark. I getting up to speed on a lot of this. I haven't been involved in the previous meetings and discussions, so I'm really happy for the recap, particularly from David. I appreciate that. Nobody wants to see that building deteriorate like Marston's Mills. I just do question, there seems like some rush to judgment about this school compared to the Marston's Mills school. I don't know anything about the plans for Marston's Mills, but I know that didn't seem to bother anybody to have that sit fallow for a long time. So I'm just wondering why there's some rush to judgment here in Katuitt.
Yeah, go ahead, David.
If I can respond to that, I think really we go back to Osterville Bay. Osterville Bay was a school that sat empty. And there's a reason that these schools were not part of the future plans back in 2009, when then Superintendent Patty Grenier closed 4 schools and relocated 70% of staff and students in a redistricting across the board. And actually there was a 5th school, the old high school at that point, that was sold to SJP. So when you see all of that happen, the decision then was to take a look at the schools that were going to require the greatest amount of upgraded money and keep the best assets. There had been a decline in population of almost 2,000 students over the course of 6 years. And it was the right move at that time. Marston's Mills was actually used for the first 5 years as cold storage for school furniture. So while it sat empty, it was not empty like many warehouses. It was filled with furniture, but there was nobody in it. And it was heated and it was cleaned. Osterville Bay was literally mothballed. And Katuitt, we entered into a 10-year lease with the Waldorf School. So it was used and it was heated and it was maintained to a minimal degree. But it was Osterville Bay that showed us what happens to a building that just sits and does nothing. There was no heat. It got moldy to the point inside where you had to wear hazmat suits and a mask because of the mold inside. Marston's Mills, we had 3 different RFPs that went out. The most recent one was for the Katuitt Center for the Arts to see if they could resurrect the building as their education wing. They have since gone in a different direction by acquiring some property, and that was really going to be too much of a bite for them, which really showed us that that school had reached its point of useful return. I think we don't want to see, if we can at all avoid it, the Katuitt Elementary School become vacant, because we know it attracts vandalism and it really does fall off the cliff pretty quickly, which is why we had originally reached out to the Cape Cod Collaborative to see if they could relocate there even on a temporary basis. And we're going to be working diligently over the next 2 years to try to find some temporary tenants so that we are able to kind of move it along until such time as we have a disposition solution either with you guys or someone else, or we come up with the money to demo it, because then we have a sense of what we're going to do. I think the liability of that school is well known, and Eric Steinhilber, the chair of the Asset Management Advisory Committee, has said, look, we're not going to have this happen the way that it did before. It's a black eye for the town, and it costs us extra money in the long run. So that's really, really where unfortunately, we've learned a lesson the hard way with some of our other assets, and that's why Katuitt is so visible right now. But I do say that we have plenty of time in which to figure out what the right outcome is going to be. And I've been encouraged that people from the village of Katuitt have had the opportunity to express what they would like to see. And we're trying to take that into consideration.
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. I appreciate the context for that. But I would just say, Scott, that any of the uses that are considered for the building would probably necessitate a septic upgrade. And, this would be an opportunity to do some real innovative attenuation for nitrogen, I would think, and other things. Might even be something that we as water commissioners might want to supplement some town funding to make sure it's the best system possible for any kind of use of the building, so that it is only within 800 feet of a well, and we want to make sure that any septic system there is of the highest quality.
Yeah, I agree, Mark. I think there is an opportunity here to upgrade the wastewater technology, maybe even as a bit of a demonstration project. There's some very new technologies out there that are being tested in the town and around the Cape that we could apply here. And there are some other site possibilities like the fertigation well that we talked about, which we could possibly demonstrate with the ball fields. Might be a nice opportunity. So I agree with you. Tom, do you have any input at this point?
Yeah.
Thoughts?
Yep, I'm very pleased in the discussion. I think that that all the people that are here tonight are taking a very proactive look at this opportunity as just that, a really good, strong opportunity for the village. Thank you very much, David, for your presentation.
Yeah.
I think that the multiple use approach to that property makes a lot of sense, and that the people in the village can have a huge benefit by maintaining that property and perhaps the building as well. So I'm very heartened by that, and I'm glad. In terms of field preservation and field operations, I would be a little concerned, just like I am initially with anything that happens on that property, with how we would manage the turf on any field that's maintained there. And as the other commissioners have alluded to, there are fertigation wells and irrigation systems that might somewhat mitigate any impacts that any fertilizers and turf management could present to our wellheads. So I remain very optimistic, and I'm very thankful that everybody's here and we're having this conversation. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Tom. I guess what I'm looking for at this point, again, I really appreciate everybody's input, and I think this is an exciting opportunity for all of us. What I'm looking for is a path forward here in terms of where do we go from here, and anybody's thoughts on this would be welcome. I'm thinking, should there be some sort of a, and maybe Jessica, you'd be a good point person here, should we form some sort of a subcommittee that cuts across some of these different organizations that are represented here today? What are anybody's thoughts as how we might move this forward? So I think we need to keep this in our focus and not, as David suggests, not let it fall off the cliff, because I can see where that could easily happen if we just talk about, you know, what ifs, but never really do anything about it. So I think we need to take this by the horns and try to figure out what some options might be. So any thoughts, Mark? Do you have a thought on that?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, Scott, if Jessica, are you on that asset committee?
No, actually, I created that committee, but I don't sit on it. I don't sit on it right now, but I attend all their meetings, especially now with Zoom. I attend every one of their meetings. But the last thing we need is what I need is another subcommittee. What I might suggest is that the district, through perhaps their policy advisory, because there is a representative from each of your commission, perhaps they should bring that up as a topic for discussion and have input within the district. So there are public meetings within the district, because you know, I think you want to hear more from the district voters on what their thoughts are. You know, the asset management has been well attended, but perhaps if you're talking about taking over the building, that should be discussed at the district level. Just a suggestion.
Okay. And Fran, I see you sitting here. Do you have any thoughts on this you want to share? You've been quiet so far.
Unfortunately, I can't. We had a problem with our agendas, so if I make any,
Oh, that's right. Okay.
it'll be an
Well,
open violation.
Okay, well, let me just open up. There's a number of other people participating in the meeting today. Any other comments or thoughts from anybody on this?
Scott,
Yes.
I think that from our perspective in the fire department, I could potentially reach out to an architect who could go through the building on a walkthrough and give us some more specific estimate, at least, of what it would look like to do a version of the renovations that Mr. Anthony spoke to, but directed more toward office space, and get us at least some rough ballpark numbers to look at whether or not this is something that the district could potentially handle financially. I know that long-term financing is relatively inexpensive right now, but still, we would, I think, be well served to have at least a rough idea of what the high-end number would look like for the kind of uses we're talking about, to find out if then, and Jessica, I appreciate your comment about taking it to the district as a whole, but I would like to have a little bit more specific ideas about rough estimate costs before we even do that, because if it's above a certain number, I'm pretty sure we would be wasting our time.
If I may, David, has there been any thought about, I know what Waldorf was paying to be in that space, but have you put any numbers to, if for instance, if the district wanted to rent it as is? And believe me, I have walked through it. I walked through with the Cape Cod Hospital, with the county at the beginning of COVID. They were looking to put a test site there, and it seemed acceptable to them. Pretty much a brand new floor in the gym, and so it's not in such terrible shape that it couldn't be easily converted to offices with partitions or whatever. But have you put any numbers to that, David, so the district might have an idea walking in tomorrow if they wanted to take possession of it?
So I can answer that a couple different ways. I know that it generally costs between $32,000 and $50,000 a year for electricity, for water, for heat. The existing boiler is original. So it is about 10 years past its useful life. It was converted over to number 2 oil from heavy oil number 4. So that has extended its life a bit, but it is older technology that could give up the ghost tomorrow, and then we would be faced with a rather substantial boiler replacement. It is an older school. It does not have full insulation, so it does cost money to heat it. The controls and technology date back from the 50s and 60s, so you're talking about an inefficient system. The windows had been replaced, so they're not single pane windows, they're double pane windows, which is a blessing in that regard, that those wouldn't need to be done right away. Someone who came in and did not trigger any kind of automatic code upgrades might be able to go in for that lower number and turn it into usable, viable space. But in the long run, there are certain things that are going to have to be taken care of. So whether or not that could be phased, that could be done over a period of 10 years, I think it's a worthwhile exercise to have an architect come in and take a look at it for the kind of use that you folks might want it to be. And certainly we can support you in that. We can make the school available as you need it. I am looking to see, and I will ask DPW and our legal department how available we can make our advisory document that was done by the architect for us. Because it was an advisory document, it was not done. I don't know if it has any kind of protective elements or if there's anything that's confidential in it. If it's available, we could certainly give that to you and give that to your architect, and that would mean that they wouldn't have to go back over certain basic elements of identifying what's there. We do know that we had a TAMS report that was done back in 2003 that was an existing conditions report that we have made available. We made it available to the Waldorf School. That is going to tell you what the existing controls were, because nothing's been upgraded since 2003. So there are some documents that would help you with that analysis as you move forward. We do have some basic floor plans. We don't have anything that's to scale drawing, but we do have some basic floor plans that we could also make available to you. I think that's a worthwhile exercise to have an architect come in and take a look and see what they think. But there is going to be a discussion with the building commissioner to see whether or not code compliance is triggered, with that change of use. And I think that that's going to be a critical first step to even see if that adds another layer of expense onto what you want to do.
David, if I may, Scott.
Yes, please.
I have a question because I know monies came, the rent that the town was collecting from the Waldorf school went into a fund to help for maintenance. And I don't think that money's ever got used, but it's now being used to offset the cost of the minor utilities that are required at the site. And my question would be, is the town willing to, if for instance, Brian Florence, the commissioner, said, you know, everything seems to be okay. If the district wanted to take it over for offices, we don't see a major hurdle there. But if would the town be inclined to upgrade any of the HVAC with that money?
The amount of money that came in was, I believe, in the neighborhood of $180,000 at the time. The architectural study that was done on the building, the conditions assessment, I believe came out of that fund, and it does diminish as we continue to have to heat and pay for the electric bill and things along those lines. So it's not a huge chunk of money. A new boiler without any new controls is probably in the magnitude of $200,000 to $300,000, partly because it's covered in a 8-inch asbestos jacket. It's an original H.B. Smith sectional boiler from the 50s, and those things are beasts to remove from the building. Many times they need to be cut into pieces that you can get out of the building because they almost build the buildings around them when they installed them. So I'm not sure that money is going to go far. I obviously can't speak on behalf of the town manager as to how he would choose to use that funding, but if there were things that we needed to put into place in order to get tenants in there for the next couple of years, there were some minor code upgrades that needed to be done, some life safety, upgrades to exit signs, fire suppression, things like that. That's really the only available funding source we have right now in order to just get us that 2-year window. So that money is going to go quick once we start to get into the building.
Another thought on where that money could go, of course, would be upgrading the septic system into some sort of newer technology. So that would be something we want to talk about as well. Well, I think we need to move this item along. We've got other things on the agenda, but again, I really appreciate everybody's thoughts on this. And Richard, I think your suggestion of bringing a little more design help with this in mind would be a great one. And Tom, are you, if I get it right, you're our policy person on the commissioners to work with Richard, maybe stay in touch on this? Would that be possible step forward here?
Absolutely, yes.
Richard, is that okay? Why don't we do that? I don't know that we need any kind of motion or action here other than that, but I really think this has been productive. And I think my sense is we're all on the same page, which is great. So let's take that next step, Richard, at your suggestion. And then we'll kind of keep this on our agenda to check back in as things progress and see if we can come up with a more definitive recommendation for you, Jessica, to take to the council and to the town manager.
Terrific. I'll see what I can set up and reach out to you, Tom, as soon as I have some idea of when potentially we could do that.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
All right, thank you.
Okay, well, thanks, everybody. We're going to move on to the next agenda. Oh, Jessica, do you have a point? No, goodbye. Okay. So we're going to move on to the next item, which is irrigation policy. You're all welcome to stay, but I certainly understand if you've got other things you need to do. So thank you again for your attendance.
Thank you again.
Okay, thank you, David. So on the irrigation policy, as I think you all know, Jen did a great job capturing a lot of the comments. I thought the workshop went very well. So Mark, I think it was your idea. Kudos for suggesting that. As you're to follow up on the previous administration, we do want to keep this very transparent and come up with the best solution. So I really feel good about the direction we're going. Jen put a good follow-up list together, and I know that I've been in touch with many of the people on the list. Or I should say several of the people. I was not able to reach everybody, but I did have a good talk this afternoon with Jack Thomas, for example, and get his thoughts. My sense is that we're going to need some more time here. I sense that we're probably not, and correct me if I'm wrong, gentlemen, but I don't think we're in a position to take action on the proposed regulation at this point. If we are, let me know, and I'm happy to have that discussion. But my sense from the comments is that maybe a little bit more thought needs to go into this. Jack has some good thoughts about, looking at some additional work. Well, one possibility would be to do some additional work on defining whether, in fact, we do have this issue that I've been presenting with regard to drawdown on the wetlands. That's something that could be done with a modeling approach, some further field investigations. So that kind of work could be done. We also, I guess, the other thought was to look at treatment needs or additional wells. It's been, from talking with Tom, it's been quite a while, with Chris Wiseman, it's been quite a while since the department has done a water supply study for future sites. My sense is that's a lot easier said than done, so I don't really know what's out there, but I would guess entertain thoughts from you both, Tom and Mark, to see if you're thinking any of those studies are warranted before we take action. And if so, I think we should at least consider the possibility of extending the moratorium to provide more time to undertake that work. But I guess I'd stop there and just ask if you could both comment on where you think we're at and what you think next steps might be on this issue.
I think you have a good read on it, Scott. I think we need to step back and look at what we've heard from the district and continually solicit information and comments from the district. I think that Jack and Vic Mastro both made some really good points that perhaps we need to study it a little closer and see not only what the effects on wetlands are, but also what the effects on the district's budget would be. Although it doesn't seem like the district is too concerned with upping their water use, given our past summer here. But yeah, I think maybe we extend the moratorium and we actively pursue this over the next couple of months, which may include, putting together an RFP for some additional research.
Mark, your thoughts?
Well, I just wonder if the irrigation measures might be part of a broader water conservation program. I'm just a lowly homeowner with my neighbor's irrigation system going out from 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. every single day this summer. They don't even live there. The lawn care guy comes by once a week. Nobody's been there all summer. It's been rented on Airbnb a couple times. So, they're not even here to see yard signs that say voluntary odd and even days for irrigation. It's just a machine that doesn't respect the calendar. It just goes and goes and goes. So my point is, I think water conservation is really what we're looking at, not necessarily, banning irrigation per se. I don't know enough about water conservation measures comprehensively, but I'm just wondering about the idea of looking at all the different measures that could be tapped to keep the production, the volume of water being pumped in the summer here is just staggering to me.
Yeah.
I'm also wondering if anybody's gone down to look at the Little River this week. Does it have water in it?
Does not.
This would be like an extreme condition.
Yeah, no, I've been down there several times. There's no water. It's dry at the Sampson's Mill Road location, very much like your photograph you provided earlier. My sense is that in terms of water conservation, irrigation is really the biggest and maybe the only real substantial opportunity to really cut down use. So I think they're one and the same, but I think you're right. And I agree that some additional time might be warranted. Jen, you indicated to me when we spoke earlier today that we've had some actually pretty good dialogue with some of the irrigation people, which I find really encouraging. Do you want to just you don't need to give names, but can you just let the commissioners and the attendees here know your experience in talking with some of the irrigation professionals on this item?
Sure. Yeah, I actually had a call yesterday from a local landscaper who does quite a bit of work in Katuitt, who is working on a property on Main Street called for some markouts. And when I asked what they were doing there for work, he said he was installing an irrigation system, but not hooking it up. He is respectful. He understands what we're trying to do. He's respectful of the moratorium. And he's actually working, because this is a larger piece of property on Main Street, he's trying to direct them into installing a private well. And I also had a call from a gentleman who just bought a house on Eaglestone, calling, asking for references or referrals for putting in a private well, because he knows what he's looking at his property as well. So.
Thanks, Jen. And I've had some good conversations with some of the larger irrigation companies that I contacted, and they seem to be pretty understanding and responsive. So I guess what I'm trying to get at here is I think the moratorium is working, in the sense, I'm sure it's not perfect. I'm sure some things are falling through the cracks, but I think people are listening and understanding. So I guess I would think that's something we should consider moving on. I'll just ask, there are a few other people here in attendance. Any other comments from the public attending on this issue before we talk about next steps? Seth, Carol, Sean, anybody?
No.
Okay.
I know that I'm going to put John on. Oh, go ahead, Carol. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I really don't have any comments, but except one, thank you for keep asking if we have any comments. That's lovely. We don't often get that opportunity, but I think you guys are on the right track. This isn't something that's going to happen overnight, and the more information you can gather and present is helpful, like you've always done, and even when you were doing the water rate increases. So that's, carry on. You're doing great.
Thank you, Carol.
Scott, I think we should obviously set a goal of having something decided before the next big irrigation system in May and June.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we do have some time to.
What do you mean by that? The next big irrigation system in May or June? Oh, you mean when it starts irrigating? Yeah. Oh, absolutely. That's what I was thinking. I mean, that's the other advantage. We do have a little bit of time here, but I think we need to get on this, much like the previous item, the previous agenda item. So I guess I would entertain a motion to extend the moratorium, because as Jen pointed out to me today, it actually, as it stands now, it will end before our next meeting. And I think if we're gonna stay on this and agree that this is a worthy item, and again, my observation is the moratorium is working. People are knowledgeable about it and respecting our work. It seems to me that would be an action we can take tonight to keep it in place. And maybe we should.
Can we just?
Yep.
Can we clarify that the moratorium is hookups to the public water supply for irrigation, not irrigation installation itself?
That's correct. I think that's the wording. I think that Jen had sent out before is pretty clear about that. We can look at it again, just to maybe even make it more clear, but I'm pretty sure that's what it says. And yes, I agree. That's the intent of it. That's what we voted on. And I would just entertain a motion to keep the same provision in there, but just extend it. And I think a period of 6 months might be a reasonable time frame to look at.
I think given the drought conditions that we're in right now, and again, I was going to just ask Sean if he wanted to share anything about his experiences with Falmouth, because I know Falmouth has had just terrible time with water supply issues in the summer and overutilization in their system, where they have to ban irrigation regularly. So I think the moratorium is helping with that, and I don't know if he wants to share any thoughts on that.
Well, my understanding is the town of Falmouth went to a complete sprinkler ban this summer, because they're experiencing the same kind of usage that we are, but on a much larger scale. So they gave you a warning, and then if you were caught watering again, they shut off your water.
Right.
Because they just couldn't keep up, even with that with both the plants and all their wells running at full capacity. They couldn't keep up, and that's between 12 to 14 million gallons a day production, and they couldn't keep up.
Yeah.
So I mean, we had a couple days that were the tank was pretty low, but I mean that's just something to keep in mind. If next summer, if we have to go to a ban, we have to, that's just ease up on our wells and our equipment, and we don't have the kind of production capacity that Falmouth does. So
Sean, is there a technical issue with the level of the water in the towers?
no, it's just usage, especially when it was really dry there.
It's
And
not a
before-
thing. It's not a question of reduced pressure or anything.
Well, as the tanks drop, you do lose a little pressure there, unless the wells are on. But most of the time, the wells were on, so we.
Yeah, my understanding, speaking with Chris about this, is that the demand is serviced directly by the pumping and not by the water tanks. Is that right, Sean? Is that the right way to think about it?
Yeah, so you have system demand, and once system demand is met, then the excess water will flow into the tanks. So sometimes, in the mornings where the rough times, like Mark was saying, everybody's got their sprinklers on. So it took us a little bit of time to catch up. Right around, say, noon, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, we were back up to where we should be in the tanks.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, all of those thoughts and conversations, I think are really beneficial, and I believe that they support the extension of the moratorium, as this is a real serious issue that is not going to go away in the foreseeable future, and so I would have no problem supporting extending the moratorium for now, and we work on.
Sounds like a motion was made, Mr. Chairman. I'll
That does
second
sound like
it.
it's a motion. I'll accept that as a motion to extend the moratorium for 6 months with the exact same provisions as we had in there before in terms of who this affects and who it does not. So the second, let's take a vote on that. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. And Jen, I'll work with you. I do think it's important, going back to my conversation with the Mashpee water superintendent, his biggest recommendation was communication. And we did do some outreach, not only with the workshop, but I made a number of calls, and I think your communications, I think that kind of stuff really helps here. So let me, I'll be in touch with you, Jen. I'm happy to take the lead on this, gentlemen. And I will be in touch with Jen. We may even want to do another mailing. I don't know if I need a commissioner's vote to do that or not. I think a lot of people may have put the October date in their calendars. So if we don't do anything, we may have some construction happening soon. So I do think we need to communicate this. And maybe I just ask that question to the commissioners feel that, fellow commissioners feel that we should do another maybe mailing or other outreach to clarify that we're keeping this in place.
When's the next mailing to the ratepayers, Jen?
The October minimum use bill, so I can include something in there because it will go to all account holders.
That's coming up soon.
But we also did send something directly to a lot of the so-called irrigation professionals the last time, which some of those people are probably on that list, but many are not. And
Yeah.
they might be the most important people to reach or as important.
That's an easy mail merge. I can do that.
Okay.
Okay.
Tom?
Put it in the Katuitt Currents that the moratorium's been extended for 6 months.
Okay, great. Well, thank you
Social
guys.
media outlets that you're involved with would be great.
Yeah, and maybe if anybody has any thoughts after tonight's meeting as to how we do outreach, I think this is important that we do the outreach for all the reasons we've talked about. A, transparency. B, to confirm that this still is in place, so we don't have people thinking that you know, it's gone by and everything's back to normal. So I think the outreach will be important. So please, if you have further thoughts, be in touch with myself or Jen or Sean or Chris about it.
Scott, it's Carol again. I have one
Yes,
other
Carol.
thought after listening to this last discussion. This moratorium is great for new services, but this summer, as Mark was alluding to, and previous summers, we're still having issues with the incorrect use or overuse of irrigation systems. So I would suggest that it goes hand in hand to look at conservation, how to get to these people who have irrigation systems, like myself, I'll be honest. Jen, I know, has started a list of them, is to, start with them on your conservation.
No, I agree. I think the good news is we're at the end of our irrigating season here. So this gives us an opportunity during the moratorium to really think through what are the right measures, whether we do this on a voluntary or a regulatory basis or what have you. But I agree with you, Carol. We need to keep that in focus and address that as well.
Yeah.
So thank you.
I second that point, Carol. That's great. Thanks for reminding us on that.
Yep.
And I think that the prior meetings when we were discussing this, we talked about the importance of the existing users installing more and updated water conservation measures onto their system. And I think, as I recall, we at one point had a motion that was going to be a requirement.
Yep.
So I don't want to lose sight of that.
I think the other thought I'm having is, Jen, if there are people like the person you spoke with who do, in fact, go the private well route, if we could kind of collect some of those stories and maybe even costs, if they're willing to share it, that might be, people lead by example. I think if some people see this being done and people volunteering, making that move, I mean, ideal, that would be the best of all worlds, wouldn't it? If people hear our message, understand it, believe it, and then take their own initiative to, get off the public system. That seems to me that's a ideal situation. So that might be encouraged by examples. So let's kind of keep track of those, Jen, as you hear more stories.
The other thing I would add to that discussion is both of the people that discussed the private wells with me asked if there was any grant program or incentive from the district for installing a private well.
That's right. And that's something we can put on the list of things to discuss in the future. Yeah.
It's kind of a double-edged sword, isn't it?
Yeah.
If people start putting in their own wells and we see the water table drop consistently throughout the district, it's going to affect our pumping abilities. So
not only that, if they do go to the private well and we're not collecting revenue, then offer an incentive on top of that. That's a double hit to the district financially as well.
Okay, well, thanks for that discussion.
Scott,
yes, Mark, yep.
One of these issues, I don't understand the connection of additional wells. What I heard from Sean earlier was that we can keep up with this extra demand for the short summer season with the existing wells. It doesn't sound like we need more quantity pumped. I don't understand that. Those came up previously as a solution to this issue. I don't think that's the question that needs to be answered. I think the issue is maybe the location of the wells. Maybe well 4 needs to be shifted to the west so it doesn't interfere with Little River. I mean, maybe that's.
Yeah, I think that was the intent, would be to replace that. That's probably the biggest well issue that we have. If I'm correct or we're correct in terms of where the issue is with regard to Little River and the wetlands. And that if we do undertake some sort of a study, which I'm sensing might be a good idea, maybe some kind of an updated modeling study. I did go to Chris's office one day to look at the most current Zone 2 modeling work, which I think was in the 1980s, as I recall. 80s still sound like yesterday to me, but they're not. So it may be time to update some of that information with some modeling work. And at that time, the nice thing about modeling is, as you guys know, we can do some scenarios. We can say, what if, like Mark, what if we move that well, what if, et cetera, et cetera. But I think the comment was, if we can get another well further away from the impact area, that might be beneficial. But I would like to talk to you guys at a future meeting about the possibility of doing some additional work like that. So I think we need to document things and really fine tune this a little bit. So I would like to move on to the on the agenda, and I'd ask for a suggestion on what we do with the minutes, because I don't know about you guys, but I started reading them this afternoon. I got through some of them. I gave one comment to Jen, and I guess I'd ask one question I'd ask on the most recent set of minutes. I think I copied you guys. She had a very brief paragraph on the input that we got at the last hearing with the irrigation. And as you remember, she did do a very good bulleting of more specific comments. Do you guys think that should be, that kind of thing should be in the minutes? And if so, I'd ask her to try to amend that for our consideration. So that's one specific question. The other one is, are we in a position to vote on all these minutes tonight? Because I'm not sure that I am, to be honest. So two questions there.
So the downside is they're piling up. We're going to add another set tonight.
Correct.
They are part of the permanent record. They need to be done. On the other hand, I don't see the need for a deadline to have them done. So I think if we could make sure that all of them get done first thing next time.
Well, I don't want to be the one holding up. If you guys have both read
no,
through
we'll
these in
have
detail.
had plenty of time to read them by a month from now. So
Yeah, okay, let's do that. Like I said, to be perfectly honest, I read through the last three. I worked from recent to backwards, and the further back I went, the harder it was to remember any details on exactly what was said or done. But I think why don't we set a hard stop deadline for the next meeting? Let's get those read and prepare any comments or edits prepared in advance of the meeting so we can take care of it quickly. Okay.
And do you want me to include the bullet point items in the newest?
What do you guys
set,
think about
or-
that? A little more
Yes.
specificity?
yes.
Okay, I think so. That was my thought. The only risk is we omit something somebody else said that they're going to wonder why they're not there. But I think you did a really good job, Jen, capturing them from my perspective. So let's do that.
Don't
Let's-
forget, you have the Zoom meeting recordings, so if you need to remind yourself, you can always go back and listen to them.
Thank you, Carol. One of the benefits of Zoom World, right?
And I read
Absolutely.
through them. I found them all to be acceptable and was ready to move forward with them tonight. So
Oh, you are. And Mark, have you read them completely? Because I don't want to be the one
I got
holding
halfway
stuff.
through it. I didn't have enough time.
Okay, good. If there's two of, not good, I'm sorry, but if two of us haven't been through them all, let's postpone.
right, yeah.
Thanks,
Well,
Tom.
if you've gone through, what did you go through, Mark? Through April 22nd?
That sounds right. You want to do a couple of them tonight?
Well, I read the last three, the most current
Okay.
three, and the only comment I
All right,
had was
all right.
so yeah, we're working from different directions there. Sorry. All right. Well, let me just ask. Let's see. I don't think we've got anything else on the agenda other than setting the next meeting date, and I do want to give Mark the opportunity to propose a different time if that's more helpful to you. Jen, what would be our next scheduled date, just so we can get it in our calendars?
So the third Wednesday would be October 21st.
Okay. Is that okay with you guys?
I think at our last meeting, we said we were going to move to the fourth Wednesday for some reason, which doesn't matter to me.
Oh,
The
yeah.
second Wednesdays, I have the Environmental Oversight Committee in Mashpee, so I can't.
I think I had suggested that because I would try to attend some of the events at the Katuitt Arts Center, which are not
Maybe
happening.
all those meeting minutes.
So much for that idea. But I'm good either way. So you want to switch to the fourth?
Doesn't matter to me.
Mark, you have a preference? Well, why don't we stick with the third Wednesday, the 21st then? And Mark, what about time? What's good time for you?
5:45 would be a little bit better.
Okay.
I don't like to drag it out too late at night either. I get tired, but
Yep. Okay.
so
5:45 it
5:45
is.
would be ideal.
I'm fine with that.
5:45
Tom
on the
is-
21st.
Okay. Jen, are you good with that then?
I got it.
All right.
Motion, we adjourn?
Second.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Good seeing you guys. Talk soon. I'll call you tomorrow, Jen, or I'll call you soon.
All right. Enjoy your vacation up there.
Thank you.
I'll be there next week.
Right.
All right, guys. Good night.
Jen, I'll put a call into Fran so that we can get the policy advisory committee
Okay,
meeting going.
sounds good. They tried to submit an agenda so that all of them could be on the call tonight, and it got rejected by the town, so that's why she
Yes.
didn't speak.
Okay. All
Okay,
right. Thanks.
good night all. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.